Welcome to The Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on The Alignment Show. And a good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Welcome once again to The Alignment Show. Our guest today, in fact, is in a different part of the world. We'll be getting to Rachael Herron here in just a moment. But as we get started today, I want to welcome you once again to the show. This will be the last episode in at least the current version of The Alignment Show. We're going to take August off. And when we come back, we're going to be in a little different format. So we'll talk a little more about that later. As we're getting started, I want to remind you of our sponsors. One of our sponsors is, in a way, myself, but I like to think of it as being more about the books that I have written. Sorry, Murphy's Law being what it is, as we go live, I get something in my eye. That's just the way it is. Anyway, the books are one of the sponsors. I have several books that are out, two in particular that have come out recently, both of them in the Sparklight Chronicles. And you'll find The Way of the Three-Year-Old Why and Medium Well, which is up here by my shoulder right now, the latest in the Sparklight Chronicles. Both of them business parables that will help you to live your values and value your life. There are at least two others in that series. One's about 3/4 of the way done. A couple of other books that are out there. As we update the availability, they will show up here on this link that I've got the QR code up there for right now. Those of you who are listening audio only, you can find them at donking.com. That's DONNKING.com/books. And that will be kept up to date. Speaking of up to date, coming up in September, there is another iteration of Sales Wise Live. This is training by my friends Bob Berg, Jeff West, and Kim Ansley, all of whom have been guests here on the Alignment Show. I just love their approach to sales. There's nothing manipulative about it, nothing high pressure. It's about building genuine relationships. If networking is one of those terms that's a little problematic for you, then we can just forget about that. What we're talking about is making friends. And so whether you're in commission sales or not, if you are in a situation to where you need to foster relationships, this is going to be a useful training for you live in Florida. And in September in Florida, not too bad as far as the temperature. Beautiful location. You will want to check it out on Sales Wise Live. And so as we turn to our guest this morning, I'll tell you that we did record this one ahead of time, excuse me, which has been unusual on the Alignment Show. We like the feel of live conversation, of course, and when we go to our new format, we're going to do our best to keep that. It will be a recorded format in the future. We recorded this episode because, as you'll hear, Rachael lives in New Zealand, so our 10 a.m. Friday broadcast time is the middle of the night for her. But in any case, we are very glad to be able to have her on with us again. This is a repeat performance, so to speak. We've had her on before. I will link to that original show. It was episode number 43, if you know how to go about finding that. But we will have a link in the show notes that will give her background. So those of you who've not seen the episode before, let me tell you that Rachael Herron is the internationally best-selling author of more than 24 books across multiple genres. These include thrillers written under the name of R.H. Herron, mainstream fiction, feminist romance, memoir, and nonfiction books about writing. She received her MFA in writing from Mills College, Oakland, and she's taught extension workshops at both University of California, Berkeley, and Stanford. A New Zealand citizen as well as an American, she lives in Wellington, New Zealand with her banjo-playing wife and brick-eating dog. We talk about that in episode 43. Her latest release is Unstuck, an audacious memoir of home and happiness. And that's primarily what we are talking with her about today on the Alignment Show. So I was talking instead of lining up the video. So I've got to click a couple of buttons here real quick. And I'm going to turn it off to my recorded self now for our conversation with Rachael Herron. Don, take it away and click the little button. So thank you, Don, for that introduction. That just seems so weird, Rachael. I know you know what I mean by that.
What a guy that guy is, that Don
Oh,
over
man.
there.
Yeah. But in any case, I am so glad to have you on here, and I'm going to apologize to you just a little bit because I'm going to throw you a slight curveball right off the top here.
Great, we love it.
What I didn't tell you before we started recording, because I just wanted to get this on the recording, is that you are perhaps, possibly, the last interview for the Alignment Show. I am taking a break, as I told you before we started recording, in August. I've got a couple of recordings, but I'm not 100% sure I'm going to come back with it. And if I do, it will be an irregular podcast because things have just gotten so overwhelming here in the home studios. People who are watching us, I haven't shaved, my hair's dirty, just haven't had time to do that kind of stuff. And I know that you understand that kind of thing. You have many irons in the fire. And so, I'll talk more about it in the outro about what's coming up for the Alignment Show. But I wanted to say that I'm pleased to have you wrapping things up if that's what it comes out to be. Certainly you will be the last in the traditional format for the Alignment Show.
Well, if I am the last in the traditional format, I am honored to be so. So thank you for
it's just
having
so good
me
to have
again.
You on. You have heard me say many times you are one of my people to have on here, and so great to have you on twice. But we want to keep our focus today on you and what you're up to. You have been involved in putting a memoir together, if I'm saying the word right. And I consider you to kind of be the queen of memoir, one of your earlier books, which we'll put a link in the show notes. I don't have it ready to go right now, but one of your earlier books is about writing memoir. And so you've written more than one, I think, but this latest.
This is my second memoir that's coming out. I have a third in the can, ready to go. And I've always been most passionate about teaching memoir and creative nonfiction. And I actually developed a course that I taught at the extension programs in both Stanford and Berkeley. So Fast Draft Your Memoir is my book about writing memoir, and that comes directly out of a class I taught at Stanford, a semester-long class.
Excellent. So folks, we will have a link to that book also. But I'm curious. You've been on the show before, and we're going to link to that episode, which kind of tells us your backstory. So what we're looking at here is what got you started with memoir to begin with. And as you're doing that, tell us what's the difference between memoir and autobiography. I'm sure you get that question a lot, but we haven't heard that here. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with that one first. The difference between memoir and autobiography is a memoir is a story about your life as seen through a period of time or seen through a theme. My first memoir was A Life in Stitches, and it was my life as seen through the sweaters that were on my needles at the time of whatever I was going through. Other people write memoirs about the time that they climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. It's pulled in. You can have a lot of memoirs as a person. An autobiography, you only get one. It is you telling the story of your life. And as Quentin Crisp, I think, put it, he said autobiography is a serialized obituary with the last chapter missing. So that's the difference. Memoir, though, we get to
let me push on that just a little bit because I can't think right now of examples, but I've seen recently people who wrote, well-known people, famous people, they wrote an autobiography up until that point in their life. They were in their 20s or 30s, and taking advantage of their being famous. and then wrote another one later and another one later. So are those just continuing, as you were just quoting, continuing, adding more chapters?
Yes, yeah, because they're really telling the story of the life of, this happened and this happened and this happened. And sure, they can write about how they felt about it, but you and I know that when we're looking at story structure and really telling a good story, we want it to have a story structure arc. We want to bring the reader through. We want to increase tension and stakes, and we want there to be character development. And that does not happen on a, Sunday through Monday kind of, or Monday through Sunday kind of week. We have to almost artificially look at what we're going to write about and say, I'm going to emphasize that really hard part. And I'm going to emphasize this part where I learned something big. And I'm going to ignore every Tuesday afternoon that we washed my hair and walked the dog. We don't put everything in the memoirs. We really choose. Yeah. Oh, and then to answer your question about how I got started, I love it. I don't think anybody's actually ever asked me that question. I got started really in a kind of a strange way. I'd always loved memoir. Memoir really had an explosion in the 90s. And I was working in a small bookstore in the early 90s, and I would see these stories of real people come out, and they weren't real people who were famous. They were just your average, person over here who's talking about something about their life, and I loved seeing into their lives. And then I think it was 2001 or 2002, my sister told me about this thing called a log that you could keep on the web, and it was a web log.
Yes.
It was, and that word, of course, turned into blog, but it was a web blog. And she said, people write what they think on the internet, and then it just moves. Because up until that point, we had static web pages, right? We would go to these were pretty new things. We'd go to the web page, we'd look at the web page. Oh, how exciting! And then I remember the first blog I ever saw. I looked at it, I read a little, couple, 3 or 4 paragraphs, and I thought, oh, I'm reading that person's thoughts. And then the next day, I'd go back and it was different. That had scrolled down and there was something new up there. And I told her that was a terrible idea. I didn't want to put my own thoughts up on the internet. And as I usually do, 5 minutes later, I had created a weblog. I had told nobody about it, and I started writing about writing, because back then I was super, super frustrated. I was a few years out of grad school for getting my master's in writing. I wasn't completing anything. I was trying to write, but not completing anything. I felt very frustrated. And I was throwing my voice out into this void. And every once in a while, I'm just going to reach out for the people who are watching. Every once in a while, I would write about the knitting that was on my needles. And because I was a knitter, it was just part of my DNA. But what happened was I was found by the knitters. And back in the early 2000s, there were 3 things on the internet. 1 was porn. We don't talk about that. 2 was funny cat videos, and 3 was knitting. That was what the whole internet was made up of. And there were these knit blogs, and there were probably only 100 of them at that time. And we all became friends and talked to each other every day and wrote these blogs. And I got really used to putting my voice out there and talking about something perhaps maybe boring or small or minute or just I thought of interest to me, but people did want to know how I made this thing or thought about this. And it was super exciting. And I got used to putting our thoughts out there. And then a cool thing that happened was when social media really hit. I remember when Facebook was new, do you remember this? People would like post a thought and other people would react. And it felt really good for people to
That's where
have
the
your voice.
thumbs up first came in.
Yeah, exactly. It's important for people to be heard. And back in the day of blogs, really only writers were utilizing that. And then social media came around, and now more voices are heard. And I love that. So that was a big answer to your question there. But.
No, I appreciate the thoroughness there. So you were already a writer at that point, having at least started some fiction projects.
Never finished, but started quite a few. Yeah.
Okay. Did having the outlet of the blog, that doesn't necessarily automatically lead to a long form memoir. Did you start completing fiction and then you said, okay, I could actually weave these things together and make a nonfiction book out of it? Or did you finish the nonfiction stuff first and that enabled you to finish fiction? Now, that's a complicated question, but I suspect
Not
it's
only,
simple
yeah,
answer.
no, it's got another funny answer in that I completed the fiction. I finished my first. I actually got to the end of a book. I revised that book. I got my agent. She sold it in a 3-book deal to HarperCollins. And then it was about the time my fourth or fifth book was coming out. So by now I had confidence, or as much confidence as any writer can have, which is not very high, as you know.
Right.
Um, I had some confidence that I could finish a novel. And then my agent was approached by Chronicle Books, and they said, Rachel has this. By then, it was famous in knitting world, so it's being a very big fish in a very, very tiny, tiny, tiny pond. But I
Oh,
had this knitting
narrow and
blog
deep.
that was
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
yeah,
There you
amazing.
go.
And so I had this blog that was popular by that point and got a lot of hits. And Chronicle Books knew I was writing, and I was writing fiction about knitting. And they came to my agent and said, "Could Rachel write us a book of patterns that we would publish?" Chronicle Books does those beautiful airport books that are so gorgeous. And my agent brought that to me, and I said, "No way! I don't want to write patterns. That's all math. I'm not going to do that." I said, "But what about a memoir about knitting?" And I did not think they would go for it, and they immediately did. So then I had to write a memoir about knitting because I had promised it, and I had never stopped. I had never even started writing it, other than little pieces on my blog,
Mhm.
which didn't. Blogs don't really translate well to pulling out and putting into books.
Yeah.
So I wrote a memoir about knitting.
Okay. Okay. I have to say, I think it's hard for me to say for sure, just partly because of the way my brain works, but I think I first discovered you through A Life in Stitches. And it's not
Oh,
because I'm a knitter. My wife is an inveterate crocheter, and
oh, I love the crocheters too.
I know the
I also
difference.
crochet. That is big.
Yeah,
That is a big thing. I do both, but
yeah.
I'm more of a knitter, but crochet is beautiful. I just taught a few friends to crochet a couple weeks ago.
Very good. And I think at
Yeah.
the time there were a lot more books out there about knitting than there were about crocheting, other than
Yes.
patterns. And so I got your book for her, and then
Oh,
as I started learning more about you, and getting into the other books that you write, and that I think that's kind of what brought us together to
that's
begin with.
lovely. I love that. Knitting for the win again.
Yeah,
Yarn for the
absolutely,
win.
absolutely. And I will say briefly, she has tried to get me crocheting. She said this will be stress relieving. It's not for me,
No, no, that's
but for
the
people
the
for
first.
whom it is.
No, but I would even push back against that. That first month or 2 of knitting or crocheting is not it's so stressful. It's not stress-free, it's not relaxing. It's
Yeah, yeah.
horrible. And then it clicks, and then you can just do it. But people forget to tell you that. You just wanna throw everything against the wall. It's so difficult and
Well, and to
rewarding.
be fair, that's probably true for most things. I just didn't stick with it long enough. Okay. But she actually had a website for a little while called the Yarn Maven, and so we joke about her being a yarn addict, and she goes
I
to
love that.
the store to get her fix, and and
Oh, I
knowing that
love
you
that.
have written, and I think maybe your next memoir is about dealing with addiction. I almost feel
Yeah,
bad talking
that's
about
the next
this,
one.
but it's a positive addiction, right?
It's great. It's a great addiction. There's a reason now my podcast is called Ink in Your Veins. I do
Yes.
like to talk and think about addiction
Yeah.
in all the
Yeah.
bad ways and the healthy ways.
Yes.
We are addicted to
Harness
writing.
that sucker, that human
Exactly.
characteristic. So exactly. So
Exactly.
talking about in this latest memoir, it's called Unstuck. And if you're far enough along to kind of presage what's coming in the next one, great. But what's out there now is Unstuck. And I find it fascinating in the connection with the alignment show, because as we talked about when you were on here before, people will think about making changes, but the energy that it takes to actually make that change is what differentiates a lot of people who would come on the alignment show. You made a
Mhm.
big change. Now, we want to talk about the book, and I do want to get a little bit into the development of it as a memoir, because we've already alluded to the idea that a memoir is not just this happened, then this happened, this happened. It's a story. there's a character facing a challenge, and in the process of
Mhm.
facing that challenge, he or she grows and changes. The standard story arc, it's still got to be
Mm.
there. I want to
Yep.
look at that process, but let's also look at what was it that led to that memoir for people who don't know you already. You've mentioned teaching at Stanford, right?
Mhm.
UCLA. Um,
Berkeley, yeah,
yeah, okay. I got the wrong campus, but
yeah.
yes, there we are. So they're going and they're listening to your accent and they're saying, okay, this is an American. You're not one of the reasons we're recording this, by the way, is because we're on different sides of the planet.
We sure are.
It is 4:20 p.m. as we're recording this. What time is it where you are?
8:20 in the middle of winter, the sun just rose,
Yes.
and I'm in
You're,
2 layers of wool.
you're on the other
Yeah.
you're in the other hemisphere. You're on the other side of the day. I take comfort in the fact that you are in the future because I know therefore nothing blew up overnight.
And it's looking good.
Very
Exactly.
good, very
Tomorrow is
good.
tomorrow is great for you.
So
Yes.
how is it that you wound up in New Zealand?
So my mother was a Kiwi. She's no longer with us, but she was a Kiwi, and she married my father. They met in Western Samoa. They raised us in the States, but she never gave up her New Zealand citizenship. I was always a half Kiwi, even though we always lived in the States. Um, and I had, citizenship and a passport. I had dual citizenship, and New Zealand is an amazing place. And my wife and I always kind of daydreamed, pipe dreams about, well, maybe someday we'll live in New Zealand. But who does that? Who does that? We had life in Oakland, California. We had both lived there for more than 20 years. We had been together for 17 years at that point. We'd had our house in Oakland for 15 years. We had all of our family and all of our friends around us. We had a huge mortgage, which we didn't know if we'd be able to pay off. We lived in a rough neighbor. I love Oakland. It is my one of my heart hometowns, but it is the part of Oakland we lived at we're in was real rough. We couldn't really take a walk. Couldn't take the dogs anywhere. Had to drive everywhere that we went, and the bus system wasn't great. And we're heading into getting older, obviously, and we always kind of like worried, what are we going to do? And then the pandemic hit, and after 4 or 5 months of the pandemic, we had this realization that was we are not seeing our family and friends who live very close to us. We are seeing them on Zoom. It's going great. And another big realization we had was that we still really liked each other, and we still wanted to talk to each other, even though we hadn't talked to anybody else for a while, face to face by then. And it came up over dinner. It kept coming up over dinner. We could move to New Zealand. And then my wife at one point said, let's do it. And I said, what? No, that's a joke. And we couldn't, of course, go without our old dog who wouldn't make the quarantine. She's too old to go. And, and almost, this is the thing, and you'll understand this, but with this show that you do, sometimes we walk forward to do a scary thing. For me, anyway, I have to walk forward in doing a scary thing, never believing that it will actually happen.
Mm,
I cannot believe it will actually happen because if I believe it, I will panic and I will get in bed and I will never pull the covers over my head again, off of over my head.
mm,
But what we did was we just applied for a visa. For my wife's name is Lala. We applied for a visa for Lala for a partner of a New Zealand citizen visa. We were told it would take a year to get, maybe, and if we got it, we would have 12 months to enter the country. So we thought in 2 years, maybe we would think about moving to New Zealand, but no commitment. And then our really old dog died, and the next day the visa came through, and they were wrong. We only had 6 months to enter, and at that moment we decided we're going.
mm.
We don't know how. We've got to sell a house. We've got to get rid of everything we own during a pandemic, um, and we pulled the pin, and we did it. And the book chronicle, the book chronicles how I was scared for 2 years, basically. I was scared to do the thing. I was scared while we were doing it. I was scared to move. I was scared to do everything that we did. And the book is really about, I think, and it's such a cliche, but feeling the fear and doing it anyway. You
Yeah.
feel the fear, You say to yourself, I can't do that. I won't do that. And then you do a little bit of it anyway. You ignore the feeling, walk forward, pretend maybe you didn't. And then you get to an incredibly new, wonderful, beautiful place just because you didn't allow the fear to keep you stuck.
Mm.
And I know that you have seen this around you in your life too. But I've worked in jobs before I was a full time writer. I was a 911 dispatcher, and I worked in 3 different communication centers over the course of my 17-year career. And I had friends in those jobs, cops, firefighters, and dispatchers who would never, ever, ever, ever have quit their job. They were so scared. They were golden handcuffed. They would never have done something differently because they were worried that they were making the wrong choice. And I think that unstuck is really about thinking that maybe there is no wrong choice and maybe there is no right choice.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
just doing, right?
Let's dig into that just a little bit more, because I think where it comes from, and this, is that the current situation may suck, but at least it's familiar. And
Yes.
it
Yeah.
could be fantastic. On the other hand, it could be so much worse. And humans
I
are
could be
wired
messing up.
about that fear. Um, yeah, it is kind of cliche, but Susan Jeffers wrote a book some years back that the title of it was "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway." Now,
Yeah, it's a big, very famous book.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, fear is given to us for a reason. And so, what I
Mhm.
want to dig into a little bit is how, because you dealt with real fear. And folks, if I've read the book. I was privileged to be able to be a part of the early part of that, because I'm a patriot,
Thank you.
patron.
Patron.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. Um, so I kind of saw the development of it. What would you advise somebody how to tell the difference between genuine fear that you should pay attention to and the fear that is, shall we say, unreasoning?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
It's beyond just simply feel the fear and do it anyway, because I could stand at the precipice of a 10-story building and feel the fear, and I'm not
And
going to do it anyway,
I
or I
shouldn't do it
shouldn't.
anyway.
You know.
But I think that exactly what you just said is something that I've been thinking about a lot, is that if I feel a fear and I am standing at the edge of the 10-story building and the fear says you'll die if you jump, then that fear is useful and good. And it is telling me something that my brain can, if I am healthy and functional, my brain can say, that is a bad idea. That's a really bad idea. There's only one outcome and it's not going to be a good one. Please step back.
Mhm.
But the normal anxiety that arises at the thought of change, what that does is it opens this can of worms into all of the things that could go wrong. Um, should I quit this job? If quitting this job will not stop you breathing, but it could make you less money. It could leave you homeless. It could leave you without your partner could leave you. Your kids could hate the fact that you left this job. No one will ever talk to you again. Those are not things that will kill you, and you can see that your brain is kind of just opening up this door and looking for problematic, scary things. That's
Mhm.
the kind of fear that it can be really, really useful to walk forward and take a step just to see what will happen next. You've heard me talk about this before, but there's this incredible book called Quit by Annie Duke.
Yeah.
And in it, she talks about the science of quitting and how brains work when they are scared like that. And what they've proven is that people who quit doing something, no matter how scared they are generally, it's proven, happier no matter what. They end up happier than staying in the situation that they knew and that was comfortable, even if it was uncomfortable. That it was comfortable that they knew it. So if the fear says, do not step into traffic, that's a good one. There's a yes or no, you're going to get hurt. If the fear is, oh my gosh, all of these things could happen and I'm very creative and I could think of all the terrible things right now, I could list them for you, that's anxiety trying to keep us back in many, many cases. But it's not easy to figure out. There's no easy way to do this.
Mm.
It does help to have sounding boards and people to talk to. And it also helps to have people who are creative and brave and daring. Because if you talk to the people you always talk to, like your mother-in-law who says, no, oh no, I knew a woman that happened to. You don't want to talk to her. You
Yeah.
want to talk to your creative best friend who says, I believe in you. Try it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm seeing an undercurrent, and maybe explicit because you've talked about this. Um, you didn't just hop on a boat and head to New Zealand. I mean, the first thing you said, let's see if we can get that visa.
One step.
And for clarity here, you could have gone at any point because you didn't need a visa. You had the dual
Right.
citizenship.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
you take a step back, look at the big picture, and say, okay, what would have to happen in order for us to do this?
hmm
And there probably could have been some other steps, just to test it, but that was a good one.
Yeah.
But then when it comes back, okay, now we've got to make another decision. Was there just one more step after that in order to continue testing?
Yes, there was. There was a really clear one. Uh, we were still talking about, we were still moving toward making the decision to fully go. But this was during the pandemic and that part of the pandemic. And New Zealand fully shut down. They basically eradicated COVID-19 for 2 years by shutting down. They didn't let anybody in the country except for citizens and partners of citizens and critical workers. Uh, and they had a quarantine at the border. There was a 2-week mandatory quarantine at the border, and you had to get a slot. And it was a lottery system. And it was very hard to get a slot because Kiwis all around the world were like, "Oh, you know where I want to go? I want to go home.
I
I'm
want to
going
go
to go
home. Yeah.
home where there's no masks, there's no COVID." So we just went to look at the lottery system, and the lottery system was always full. I would glance at it sometimes, and I would never see a slot. And one day, Lala was in my office, and I said, "Look, this is what you got to do. Look at this lottery system. I'm going to look at the time that we would, be near going. There's never a green box, and there was a green box."
Oh my. Yeah.
And we and you couldn't buy a plane ticket. You could not even buy a plane ticket to New Zealand until you could prove you had a quarantine slot. And we grabbed the quarantine slot, and then suddenly that was the moment. That was the step out into the off of the building to see if we could build our wings on the way to New
Mhm.
Zealand. Because then we had 4 months to enter. It was no longer 6 months, it was 4 months, and we had to go. And that's when we started taking all of the steps to pack up, sell the house, get rid of stuff. Yeah,
Now,
it was terrifying.
at what point would you, because this is retrospective now, of course,
Yeah.
at what point was the point of no return? I mean, for
I think.
instance, you could have
Yeah.
sold everything and be ready to get on the
Yes.
boat and then say, no, no, let's just move to Arizona or
I
whatever.
love that you asked that. I love that you asked that because there are some people in this world who are really naturally huge risk takers and would have done the same thing and would have just gone, "Yeah, let's go to New Zealand. Here we go." And they wouldn't have lost sleep over it. I am an anxious person, and I have always been an anxious person. And it's part of the way I run. It's ever since I was a kid, I've been this way. And I can tell you there was never a point of no return. We were basically getting on the plane to go to New Zealand and talking, and I was still thinking about the fact that we had winnowed all our belongings down to a couple of pallets that were on a boat and 2 suitcases each. And I told Lala, "If we hate it there, let's go try Mexico, or we could go live with your dad, or we could go to, Thailand. We don't have to." I still almost didn't quite totally commit to New Zealand. It did in a big way, but I think maybe the point of no return did not occur until we bought this house that we live in now. It was when I strapped myself back down. During the whole course of the book, we were unstuck.
Mhm.
We'd sold the house, we're moving around trying to find a new life. And then, as you know, at the end of the book, we buy this house, and I realize, oh my God, am I stuck again? Am I in the same place that I was?
Mm.
And spoiler alert, it will not ruin the book. But the realization for me that I got from doing all of this is that I am never stuck. I know that I can extricate myself from anything if I am healthy enough to do so. I can. I'm not. I'm so much less scared now. If we just decided we hated New Zealand tomorrow, which we don't, we love it so
Mhm.
much, but we just sell everything and do it again. It's
Yeah,
okay. It's hard work and it's doable.
that is a true revelation. That's not the right word. We were
No,
talking
I
about
think that's a good
story arc.
word.
We were talking about story arc, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a spoiler, but it's kind of not. I mean, this is the growth. This is the realization that
Yeah.
you could do it again if you needed to.
Yep.
I had a friend in high school. He and I graduated together, and he got a job straight out of high school with Texas Instruments and wound up with the rest of his life. He has spent the rest of his life going between Thailand and Japan. And, with my little West Tennessee hometown, that just seems so exotic.
Yes.
I'll bet to him now, and I may see him in a little bit. We've got our 50th high school reunion coming up in October.
How
I don't know if he'll
fun.
make it or not. But I would bet that to him now, that just seems like every day. So
Yeah.
has New Zealand become, okay, this is just our everyday existence now. And if we decided to move to Thailand, that would be our everyday existence. But
Yes, it has become our everyday existence, but it's given us this massive appreciation. We've been here for 3 years, 3 years next week. It'll be 3 years. And
happy anniversary.
there, thank you. It's one of the anniversaries I do celebrate.
Yeah.
And every single time we look at the harbor, I'm not kidding. Every single time we look at each other and go, "Can you believe we live here? Can you
Wow.
believe?" And it is easier here. It is slower paced. We live in a big city. We do live in Wellington, but it's like a big little city. It's 400,000 people, and it is
Mhm.
huge. You can walk across it. Life is easier. The world is cleaner. The people are actually nicer. It is like living in the 60s. I'm telling you, the
Mm.
New Zealand is still back in that very polite society kind of thing, and it's lovely, and it has become every day. But I guess what I'm saying is, knowing how hard it was to get here and what we left, it is a joy. We appreciate every single moment of it.
Let's see if this feels accurate as opposed to Wellington becoming every day the way that Oakland was every day.
Hmm.
That what it has done is to turn your everyday into something magical.
Yes, 100%. And I think that if we ever decided to go somewhere else, which I don't see us doing, but if we did, the same thing would apply because we
Mm.
know how to find that magic. We had gotten to a place in Oakland. We'd gotten together youngish. We'd bought this house. We'd really strapped ourselves in. We'd had a lot of debt. There had We had not felt like we had choices for
Mhm.
a very long time, and by making choices that were good and solid and strong, but they were still choices that we had felt locked into. Now I feel like we choose to stay here. Even though we bought a house, and yes, technically we're staying here, but we're consciously always choosing to stay here because we
Mhm.
want to, because
Don't
we
have to.
love to. There's a point in the book where we've sold the house, the stager is coming, the money's about to hit the bank. And yeah, it was right before we sold the house, but the money is coming real quick. We own nothing, and friends are over, and I'm running around with my hair on fire trying to get things done, and we're having conversations of all these things. And in front of everybody, I say to Lala, I said, "Do you want to get divorced? Because now's the time.
Now's the time.
Like now,
Yes, we're going to do it.
we could cut a check. This is the perfect time if you want to get divorced." And she laughed, and everyone else was horrified. But we're consciously choosing each other, and that's what I think we should be doing with our lives. In my relationship, I always want to consciously be choosing her and have her be consciously choosing me, and I
Mm.
want to be consciously choosing my life on a daily basis. And I really do feel like it's this it's this key, and I know you'll understand this, that we choose how we react and how we act in our lives, and I can continue doing that no matter how old I get, as long as I've got some ability to move my hands or my head. um, I can still choose the response and choose how I go into a day, and that choice is what makes
Mm.
it all so worth it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the tagline for this show is "Live your values." That is, live what's
Yeah.
important to you. To value your life. You,
Yes.
you are the poster child for that. So,
No, I think you are, but
well,
I will help you hold the flag.
yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. So, just to be explicit here for people listening, I think there's at least two lessons. One is that the feel the fear and do it anyway. Of evaluating it one step at a time. You can make choices and changes in your life. And the other side of it is you can do that right where you are.
Yes, I
I mean,
love that.
if you guys had decided to stay in Oakland because it was deciding, There's no way to know unless we can somehow get into an alternate universe, of course. But
Right.
I have a feeling that it probably would have made everyday life in Oakland more magical because it wasn't we're
Absolutely.
stuck here, we're choosing to be here.
Yes, absolutely. And and I think a really big part of making those kinds of decisions that I have come to, and I've really found this through writing. And then as is very often the things that I learned on a real deep cellular level in writing, then I apply to the rest of my life. But there is no right decision. There is no wrong decision. As an anxious person
Mhm.
with anxiety, I can really get stuck in that loop of, but what's the best choice? What's the best choice? I got to figure out the best choice. I'm going to screw everything up. But knowing that there's no making the right decision, you make the decision right.
There
And
you
you're
go.
not the first person to say that, but, there y it doesn't matter what it almost doesn't matter what you choose. We could have chosen to stay in Oakland and stay in the exact same house and not change
Mhm.
anything, but making that decision right would have been the way to do it to find that magic, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know if it was in that same book. Susan Jeffers wrote like 15 books, I think. But in
Mm,
at least one of them, she made that point that people worry about making the wrong decision. And she said there are just simply different right decisions with different outcomes, different consequences,
yes,
but they're,
yes,
they're all right decisions. They're just different.
yes,
So it's very
yes, I
similar to
love
what we're
that.
talking about here. I
I
also
love
wonder, and I have two things that I want to get, they're in my head right here if I can get them out before we wind up. Um, I'm wondering if part of your lesson, as an anxious person, and I have different anxieties. I think, not to talk about her behind her back. She doesn't ever watch the podcast, but who knows? My wife has a tendency to hold on to lots of things, and I think that's probably out of some sense of
So does
anxiety. You
so
all
does
have
my
a
wife.
lot of stuff, and you
Yep,
had to pare it down.
yep.
As I've gotten older, I have realized that as long as I've got coffee and chocolate, a Kindle, and a back scratcher, yeah, that
Back scratchers
yeah,
unite.
there we go. Yeah, as long as I've got these things, I'm basically okay.
Yes.
Did you kind of learn that? Like, have you all accumulated more stuff? I don't know this
We
one way or the other.
We have accumulated more stuff. What we did was when we got here, we took over an apartment. We took over a lease, and these people were moving to the States, and they said, "We've got to sell everything," and it was up 50 steps. And we said, "Well, we've got to buy everything because we don't have anything." So we bought all their stuff. It was like moving into an Airbnb, but you
Oh,
own all of the stuff that you move into. So we got like furniture and dishes and all the stuff that we had left
that
behind in
saved
the
a lot of
States.
hassle for sure.
It saved a lot of hassle, it saved a lot of money, they gave us great deals, but suddenly we had, like, a household's worth of goods, and living here for 3 years, we picked up little things, and my wife is definitely a collector. Her but she likes stuff, but I will say this, I don't like stuff as much as she does. I like getting rid of stuff. I loved getting rid of everything and just knowing that what was in my suitcases sometimes I felt like I had too much in my suitcases, like, I would
Yeah.
like to get rid of other stuff. But I've noticed in her, she does not have the same consuming, collecting
Mhm.
attitude anymore. It's almost as if she and I am extrapolating, I am from what things she has said,
Mm.
but it has made her feel freer and less like she has to hold on to every single thing. I think
Mhm.
this is something we come by honestly, her family that kind of runs in her family,
Yeah.
the saving for a rainy day kind of
Mhm.
thing. But there was a moment where I was like so happy with what I had. I had 1 week's worth of clothes, which I thought was amazing. It was so easy. I loved everything that I had. And I had told myself that when the ship gets here, I'm going to go through all of my boxes of personal possessions because I shipped over books and clothes and stuff like that. And I'm gonna throw it. I'm gonna give it all to the thrift store. I'm gonna give it all away. And then I opened those boxes and I was like, oh, I really like this shirt. Oh, I really love these shoes. Wow, what smart person sent me these? So now I do feel like it's pretty balanced.
Mhm.
We have much less
Okay.
stuff, but we still have a bunch of stuff.
I'm putting words in your mouth and disagree with this if it's not accurate, but does it feel more like that now you have stuff as opposed to stuff has you?
Yes,
Okay.
100%. And I've really embraced this idea of having a container for everything. And when it doesn't fit in the container, is when you have to get rid of stuff, and that includes the house. The house is a container. I have one little storage, unit. It's 4 drawers right here, and this is my yarn container. When
Mhm.
those drawers are full, which they actually aren't right now, but when they're full, I can't have any more yarn, and that really restricts I have 1 shelf for sweaters,
Uh-huh.
And if I have another sweater, I need to get rid of a sweater. And that kind of containment has really worked well for me. Yeah.
I'm impressed by that with the yarn, simply because I am married to a yarn addict, and the
It takes up a lot of room.
yeah, there is no such thing as too much yarn.
She's a maven. I'm sure she knows that acronym, which is SABLE, which is Dash Acquired Beyond Life Expectancy.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Oh goodness.
Sable yarn.
Okay, I'm gonna quit on this one before I get in trouble. The other thing is, people will make moves. And then let's see, how can I make a quick comparison here? There have been a number of things in my life that, in retrospect, I think, that would have been a good memoir. It would help me to process it. There could be other people that would be encouraged by it. And I can't remember stuff accurately.
Mm.
Memory is notoriously unreliable. And
Mhm.
I know that Lala asked you at some point, as you were writing the book, how do you remember all this stuff? And you had a good answer to it. The answer shows up in the book if it's not too much of a spoiler. But
It's
how
not too much
is
of a
it that
spoiler.
you were able to do that?
So for this particular book, what I do now is I have a Patreon, and I write an essay a month, and that's kind of how I collect memories that then later get collected into books. And what I did for Unstuck was every month that we were moving, during those times, I would write an essay, and then later I had to take those essays and shape it into story structure and give it, the motion that I wanted it to. So
Mhm.
people on the Patreon were getting the first drafts, and then the book turned into the final draft of how everything in it is still true. I have just moved things and emphasized this and de-emphasized this that it's not as important to the book. But when we're talking about looking at past experiences that are further in the distance, I have a very bad memory. What I like to advise people to do is those memories that we have, the ones that come through, for me, they're not even clear memories. I don't have a good visual mind's eye, so I can't really see things that happened, but I have a feeling. I have the feeling. I remember how I felt was emotionally,
Mhm.
and I can reconstruct what I think probably happened and present that on the page as truth. It is this thing that is accepted in memoir is that very few people have the eidetic memory that remember what's the other word for that the
Photographic or
historical memory.
yeah,
Yeah, the one where you remember everything.
yeah.
Very I can't even remember the word for it, but very few
Ironically,
people
I
have
can't either.
that.
Yeah.
I love it. So when you read in memoirs, you'll see whole dialogues, see what the kid said to mom and then what the mom said to the boyfriend. And this was, 45, 50 years ago. We know that is an accepted um, concept in memoir that the writer is recreating what they remember.
Mhm.
We're using fictional techniques. We're talking about the setting. We're talking about what you picked up in your hand and then what mom said. And what we're doing is we are trusting that the memoirist is going as true as they possibly can to support what they feel happened and as much as they remember of it. And then they're using their brains because they know their mother or they know this ex partner and they know themselves. They know what this ex partner would always say in that situation. And I know what I would always say back, and it's not a good idea. And then you put that on the page and you present that as truth. But that's why you'll see at the beginning of most memoirs, the memoirist will say something like, I've recreated this as faithfully as I can. Some instances have been moved for story's sake. Some names have been combined. We get to do that in order to tell the story, as long as what we're telling honors the truth of what we remember. There's a great, I don't know if you read Educated by Tara Westover, but she does this great thing where at the end of many of her chapters she writes really really well about what happened to this brother and how he fell and how he got hurt and what the blood looked like and all of this. And then at the end of the chapter she'll say, my mom says that didn't happen. My brother says it was the other brother. My other brother says that he was fine. There was no fall. And in doing that, she's showing her memory, she's showing other people's memories. And what that does, instead of making me not trust her, it makes
Mhm.
me trust her more
Yeah, yeah.
because all memories are fallible. And they've proven that every time we look at a memory in our brains, every time we pull it out of the drawer that it's in and look at it, we're changing it a little bit. We
Mhm.
can't help doing that. So there's no looking for the truth. There's only presenting as a memoirist what our truth is. And and being aware of and conscious that other people have other memories that sometimes directly contradict that, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We
The
just got a
truth
little
of it.
memoir lecture. Sorry, Don.
No. Well, and the truth is that this is what I remember now. So it's a
Yes.
present moment thing.
Yep.
There was one I was reading recently. I wish I could remember who it was. That they said, this is what I remember of what happened. It is
Yes.
true, comma mostly.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, and that kind of
Exactly.
gets at the flavor of it. So before we
Yeah.
get off from here, I want to be sure people can find these things that we've been talking about. For folks who are on with us on video, I've got a QR code here, and this would take you to Unstuck on Amazon. And I think this is the cover that you've had from the beginning, at least from what I have seen.
Yeah,
Um,
I got it pretty early in the process. I hired a cover designer,
yeah, and I mean
but
that's a
it's been
great
around a bit.
that just really gets at it.
Thank you.
And although this is pointing to the Kindle version, from there you can get to other versions. You've got an audio book, I think,
I've got
and
an
you
audiobook.
narrated it yourself.
I did. It's my third book that I've narrated, and I love doing it. And actually, if you wanted to add it to the show notes, you can look at all the different versions over at RachelHerronBooks.com, which is
Okay,
the
yeah,
Shopify site.
we
So,
will add
yeah,
that. In fact, is that the other QR code I have here is to your website.
that
Uh,
might be a different one because I've got RachelHerron.com and then I've got
yeah,
RachelHerronBooks.com.
we're going and although we're recording this, we're going to kind of do something live here, as if it were
Ooh,
live, because we've
mhm.
got your website here, and there is a link there that says books,
And that
and
probably
that's
goes
not
to the
that's
wrong
not the same
place.
one. Yeah. Okay. So Rachel, let's go ahead and we'll have it at least on here like this. Rachel,
Perfect.
and get this thing to work here.
RachelHerronBooks.com. I'll vamp while you type, and I was just telling Don earlier that you are just the most technically savvy. Oh, look at that. There
Isn't
it
that
is.
wonderful? Yeah.
And that's the ebook, paperback, and audiobook. So,
Very good, very good. And I like to and see here's other stuff here, folks. In fact, there's that Life in Stitches 10th
yeah.
anniversary edition. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was both of those. I narrated both of those books there too. A Life in Stitches and Fast Draft Your Memoir.
And anybody who heard you on the first episode, they know that one of the things I love about you is your voice.
Well, one of the things I love about you is your voice. So it's a mutual admiration society.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, folks, we had again for folks who are on here audio only. I had a little bit earlier on the crawl down here. You can get to Rachel's newsletter, which, by the way, that newsletter, Rachel, does that also include the links to the Patreon community that you were talking about?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So
Sure does.
folks, I would deeply encourage you to do that. RachelHerron.com. And again, for folks who are on here audio only, Rachel is spelled Rachael. There's more than one version of that. Herron has two R's. So RachelHerron.com/write will take you to her newsletter. Rachel has a podcast. It is on YouTube as well as on audio. And there's kind of a bonus in there. You and Sasha Black get on every so often.
We
And
do.
I'm going to warn people, if you listen, what do you call it, the Black Heron?
Yeah, that's the
Series.
black heron, and it is not censored. There are naughty
Yes,
words in there.
yes. So it's not safe
Sasha
for
likes a
work,
naughty
folks.
word.
Yeah,
It is
yeah,
not safe for work. My podcast, Ink in Your Veins, mostly safe for work. Every once in a while, an expletive will sneak through, but mostly safe.
yeah,
Sasha
yeah.
Black and I on the Black Heron, no.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Don't listen with people.
But the dynamic is fantastic. I'll tell you honestly,
Oh,
I seek to have that kind of conversational quality in every episode we have here. People just having fun
oh,
talking. And
you
so
always do. You're so good at facilitating this. You're just a master at it, and I hope you enjoy your time off.
I'm going to do my best. I tell people sometimes I'm retiring from my college teaching job. When this episode airs, I will retire 5 days after this episode airs.
Oh, that's so
But
great.
I also tell people I may have to go back to work to get some rest. The honeydew list is long. We shall
I
see.
believe it. I
But in
really do.
any case, Rachel, I appreciate so much you being on here with us. I look forward to continuing to interact. I'll mention that as part of Rachel's Patreon, she has an ongoing series. It's called Rachel Says Right, and that they meet like twice a week, and it's not at the same
2
time
or
every
3 times
week.
a week.
It,
Yep.
it, it, it moves around. And folks, I find it to be encouraging in my own writing. You heard me say, I think, I may have said this before we started recording. I hadn't done any writing in the last 2 weeks, and I'm feeling it. But the writing that I have done, it's been. And you are
For
making a
anyone
huge.
who love hearing that. For anyone who wonders about that, we really do just sit on Zoom in silence and write.
Yeah.
It's weird and wonderful, isn't it? You don't look at Zoom, you're just doing your own work, but you're not alone.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
have the feeling of not being alone.
Yeah. It's great.
It's interesting
Great.
how that
Well,
works. And there's like 5 minutes at the beginning where we'll check in with each other, and you can
a little
come and
chit chat.
go, you know.
Yep.
But this is a real benefit of Patreon membership. So
No. Thank you, Don. Thank you for everything that you do. I really appreciate you. I've been looking forward to this all week.
it is my pleasure, and truly. And so I will look forward to more interactions one way or the other. I will eventually get, I've got 3 books that are in process right now, Rachel. So I've got
I
one
feel
done.
your pain.
Yeah. Yeah. In any case, I will do the awkward thing now of turning this recorded interview over to my virtual self again for the outro. So, Don, take it away. And I'm over here on this side. Yeah, we got to get that straight at some point. Anyhow, wow, what a great conversation. I hope that you found it as engaging as I did. I love talking with Rachel, and looking forward to having more conversations like that. You heard my doubts about the ongoing alignment show. I think at this point, definitely, I've got several recordings that we've already done. I've got several more that are scheduled. We will be continuing with the show as long as I'm having fun with it. Kind of what it boils down to. And somebody has sent me an article that I haven't had time to read yet about the myth of consistency. There is this widespread idea among podcasters that if you're just doing it once a month or every 2 weeks or however often you do it, you need to be consistent with when you post it. And if that's true, I think it's probably going to cost some listenership. But I've got to take care of me, and so the podcast may become irregular. On the other hand, that article may indicate that it won't make that much difference. And one of the things we've noticed here around the alignment show the last several months, when we first started, this is episode 73 that we're on right now. When we first started, we had a lot of engagement via chat. And over the last 2 or 3 months, we really haven't. There hasn't been that much interaction while we were live with the broadcast. Still plenty of people watching it in replay. I think people's lives are busy, and you can watch it in chunks if you need to, in replays. And so, with our new format, it will be limited to a half hour for some technical reasons, and then it will just be recorded. We're still going to be broadcasting it. I intend for it to be at 10 a.m. on Fridays. We may vary from that. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But in any case, I hope that you do find the alignment show to be encouraging to you in your own journey. As we frequently say here, live your values to value your life. And we intend to continue with that on the alignment show. So we will not see you next week. There's going to be the month of August will take off. We'll be back as the first week in September with new guests, new format, new opening music. We're going to be making some changes there as well. But in any case, I hope that as we record this, I hope your summer is going well. Where Rachel is, that your winter is going well. And whatever happens, I hope that you manage to find support to live your values so you can value your life. We'll see you next time, whenever that is, on the Alignment Show. That's it for this week's episode of The Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. And remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.